Welcome to Read to Me, Matt Dunn. I'm Matt Dunn, and I'm going to read to you Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We are in chapter 5. Frankenstein had just received a letter from his friend Clerval. Chapter 5. Clerval then put the following letter into my hands. To thee, Frankenstein. My dear cousin, I cannot describe to you the uneasiness we have all felt concerning your health. We cannot help imagining that your friend Clerval conceals the extent of your disorder, for it is now several months since we have seen your handwriting. And all this time you have been obliged to dictate your letters to Henry. Surely, Victor, you must have been exceedingly ill, and this makes us all very wretched, as much so nearly as after the death of your dear mother. My uncle was almost persuaded that you were indeed dangerously ill, and could hardly be restrained from undertaking a journey to Ingolstadt. Clerval always writes that you are getting better. I eagerly look like a slash, but I guess it's just paper glitchiness. I eagerly hope that you will confirm this intelligence soon in your own handwriting. For indeed, Victor, we are all very miserable on this account. Relieve us from this fear, and we shall be the happiest creatures in the world. Your father's health is now so vigorous that he appears 10 years younger since last year. Your father's health is now so vigorous. Oh, that's good. Your father's health is now so vigorous that he appears 10 years younger since last winter. Ernest also is so much improved that you would hardly know him. He is now nearly 16 and has lost that sickly appearance which he had some years ago. He has grown quite robust and active. My uncle and I conversed a long time last night about what profession Ernest should follow. His constant illness when young has deprived him of the habit of application, and now that he enjoys good health, he is continually in the open air, climbing the hills or rowing on the lake. I therefore proposed that he should be a farmer, which you know, cousin, is a favorite scheme of mine. Scheme. She likes to scheme a farmin'. I love to scheme my farms. I'm a farm schemer. A farmer's is a very healthy, happy life, and the least hurtful, or rather the most beneficial, profession of any. My uncle had an idea of his being educated as an advocate, that through his interest he might become a judge. But besides that, he is not at all fitted for such an occupation. It is certainly more credible to cultivate the earth for the substance of man than to be the confidant and sometimes the accomplice of his vices, which is the profession of a lawyer. I said that the employments of a prosperous farmer, if they were not a more honorable, if they were not a more honorable, they were at least a happier species of occupation than that of a judge, whose misfortune it was always to meddle with the dark side of human nature. My uncle smiled and said that I ought to be an advocate myself, which put an end to the conversation on that subject. And now I must tell you a little story that will please and perhaps amuse you. Do you remember Justine Moritz? Probably you do not. I will relate her history, therefore, in a few words. Madame Moritz, her mother, was a widow with 4 children, of whom Justine was the third. This girl had always been the favorite of her father, But through a strange perversity, her mother could not endure her, and after the death of M. Moritz, treated her very ill. My aunt observed this, and when Justine was 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother to allow her to live at her house. The republican institutions of our country have produced simpler and happier manners than those which prevail in the great monarchies that surround it. Hence, there is less distinction between the several classes of its inhabitants, and the lower orders, being neither so poor nor so despised, their manners are more refined and moral. A servant of Geneva does not mean the same as a servant in France or England. Justine, thus received in our family, learned the duties of a servant, a condition which in our fortunate country does not include the idea of ignorance, and a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being. That's very cool of them. Yes. After what I have said, I dare say you well remember the heroine of my little tale, for Justine was a great favorite of yours, and I recall you once remarked that if you were in an ill humor, one glance from Justine could dissipate it, for the same reason that Aristo gives concerning the beauty of Angelica. So looked so frank-hearted and happy, my aunt conceived a great attachment for her, by which she was induced to give her an education superior to that which she had at first intended. This benefit was fully repaid. Justine was the most grateful little creature in the world. I do not mean that she made any professions. I never heard one pass her lips, but you could see by her eyes that she almost adored her protectress. Although her disposition was gay and in many respects inconsiderate, yet she paid the greatest attention to every gesture of my aunt. She thought her the model of all excellence, and endeavored to imitate her phraseology and manners, so that even now she often reminds me of her. Jeepers, how long's this letter? Oh my God, let's get to the end of this letter. When my dearest aunt died, everyone was too much occupied in their own grief to notice poor Justine, who had attended her during her illness with the most anxious affection. Poor Justine was very ill, but other trials were reserved for her. One by one, her brothers and sisters died, and her mother, with the exception of her neglected daughter, was left childless. The conscience of the woman was troubled. She began to think that the deaths of her favorites was a judgment from heaven to chastise her partiality, whatever. She was a Roman Catholic, and I believe her confessor confirmed the idea which she had conceived. Accordingly, a few months after her departure for Ingolstadt, Justine was called home by her repentant mother. Poor girl. She wept when she quitted our house. She was much altered since the death of my aunt. Grief had given softness and a winning mildness to her manners, which had before been remarkable for vivacity. Nor was her residence at her mother's house of a nature to restore her gaiety. The poor woman was very vacillating in her repentance. She sometimes begged Justine to forgive her unkindness, but much oftener accused her of having caused the death of her brothers and sister. Perpetual fretting at length threw Madame Moritz into decline, which at first increased her irritability, but she is now at peace forever. She died on the first approach of cold weather at the beginning of the last winter. Justine had returned to us, and I assure you, I love her tenderly. She is very clever and gentle and extremely pretty. As I mentioned before, her mind and her expression continually remind me of my dear aunt. Crazy, I guess. Crazy. I must say also a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. I wish you could see him. He is very tall of his age, with sweet laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes, and curling hair. When he smiles, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, which are rosy with health. He has already had 1 or 2 little wives, but Louisa Byron is his favorite, a pretty little girl of 5 years of age. What a little creepy deeper. Now, dear Victor, I dare say you wish to be indulged in a little gossip concerning the good people of Geneva. The pretty Miss Mansfield has already received the congratulatory visits on her approaching marriage with a young Englishman, John Melbourne, Esquire. Her ugly sister, Manon, married M. de Villard, the rich banker, last autumn. Your favorite schoolfellow, Louis Manure, has suffered several misfortunes since the departure of Clairvaux from Geneva. But he has already recovered his spirits and is reported to be on the point of marrying a very lively, pretty French woman, Madame Tavernier. She is a widow and much older than Manor, but she is very much admired and a favorite with everybody. I have written myself into good spirits, dear cousin, yet I cannot conclude without again anxiously inquiring concerning your health. Dear Victor, if you are not very well, write yourself, and make your father and all of us happy, or I cannot bear to think of the other side of the question. My tears already flow. Adieu, my dearest cousin, Elizabeth Lavenza. Geneva, March 18th, 1700s. Ha! Wow. That was a long letter. 2 pages. And then now we're still in chapter 5, so we got some more to do. We got another letter, so we'll do a part 2 for the chapter 5. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below. Good, bad, I'd like to talk. And I hope I see you again because we're friends now. Yeah. Yeah.